Hi, hello. Welcome to our webinar today. Welcome. I will just give everyone a couple of minutes to filter in because it takes a little bit of time. It's a lovely Tuesday. We are starting right on the dot at 11, so I do know that folk are coming in from other meetings as well, so we will just give them a second, but I can see everyone filtering in now, which is just amazing. Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome. Whilst we are waiting for people to join, I'll just pop up a little poll. It's just to give me an idea of where we're at in our employee survey journey. Are we currently using any survey software? Are we using non-specialized software? And that kind of thing. So do just pop your answers in that poll. That would be awesome. There's still people trickling in, so I am just going to give them a couple more seconds. But whilst we wait, welcome. I am Lucy. I'm COO here at Stribe, and welcome to our webinar. We're really going to be here for you today. So any questions that you have, please make sure you put them in the Q&A box. People can kind of upvote them through the session, and then we'll have time at the end to go through any questions. So if you do have some now, please feel free to get them in early, even though we haven't gone through the content. Anything in relation to employee engagement, employee surveys, we're more than happy to talk about at the end. We also really want this to be interactive. We want this to be an opportunity for you to network as well with like-minded individuals. So the chat box is at the bottom of your screens. It is available for you. So do say hi in there, pop your names, what you want to get out of the webinar, maybe your position, where you work. Feel free to use that as you go to add comments or feedback for us. We are always ears when it comes to things like that. So it looks like the numbers are starting to settle from what I can see. So I will get going with the first few slides. So who are we? For those that don't know us, we're Stribe. We're focused on creating software that really works for your team and the unique environment that you operate in. Every employee, team, and organization is so different. And we recognize that you need pulse survey software that will support you through everything. We work with organisations such as UK Space Agency, Newcastle United Football Foundation, and councils such as Bolton and Barking and Dagenham, and the NHS as well. We have a fabulous team of customer success specialists that work alongside you to craft everything from the way that you launch your surveys to achieving those final goals that you have as well. Just going to end this poll. So what will we be covering today? It's a really packed agenda, and I've made sure to weave in lots of actionable insights into every slide just to make sure that you'll have loads to take away. For those that can't stick around for the full thing, we will be sending the recording out to you afterwards. One thing to keep in mind with all of this is that there is a huge amount of detail that we're covering. It can get quite overwhelming when you think about, gosh, all of these things that I need to do. One thing to keep in mind with all of this is that there is a huge amount of detail, and not everything will be right or relevant for you at that point in your journey or your organization that you're currently working for. So take what you can, action what you can, and just leave the rest. We're not going to be offended. We definitely don't take an all or nothing approach here at Stribe. We love small changes that really make a difference. And that those changes build up over time. So we're sharing a lot of different advice, so you can all pick up something and learn something that you can take into your daily lives. Finally, at the end of all of this, we will have that Q&A. So any questions you have, just remember to pop them into that Q&A box. So for some of our regulars, you may have seen this question before, but I always think it frames the conversation that we're going to have today really, really nicely. So thinking about the last 5 customer surveys you've been asked to answer by maybe your telephone provider, maybe your bank, retail shops, we've all had them. How many have you actually completed and submitted? If you want to, just pop your answers into the webinar chat. I think I have put it on so everyone can chat. Have a think about those last 5 customer surveys. Let me know how many, as maybe a percentage or total, have you answered. I know what my answer is. I'll give you a second to pop them in. Awesome. So I know my answer. It was probably none. Why not? The surveys were really long. The questions were long or awkwardly phrased. I didn't really see what was in it for me either. So these are all kind of reasons as to why we personally don't engage with these surveys that were sent. And they also are really applicable to our employees. Gathering employee feedback at work is something that all managers and all HR teams need to do at some point in their careers. But many of these people are making the same mistakes as banks. We're making the employee survey process really time consuming, really confusing, and perhaps a little bit dull as well. We're forgetting that there are human beings on the other end, and we need to think about those. We're also failing to prove the benefits to the workforce as we communicate those surveys too. So as a result, completing surveys has become a really inconvenient task for employees and one that does slip down the to-do list. These things are creating kind of 2 issues for us. One, employees will either rush through surveys, they'll skip questions, or they'll answer in a way that doesn't reflect their true feelings. How many of you have just clicked 10, 10, 10, 10, or 0, 0, 0, 0 on your last customer survey that you were sent? This is going to give you inaccurate data, and you're going to build a strategy based off of that inaccurate data. Longer term, these results can also these mistakes can also impact our response rate, with employees becoming less and less likely to participate in the survey. Today, we're going to talk about how to launch your employee surveys or your employee survey software to make sure that you can avoid these mistakes and really hit the ground running. If you are partway through your journey, I can see a few folk here are already using survey software. So you're probably in that cadence already. We are talking about kind of taking it from the beginning, but this is there's a huge amount of information in here that will really help you refresh your journey as well. Make sure you're making the most out of them. So before we start, I just want to share a short checklist that you can use to make sure that the actual survey software that you're using will give you the most out of each and every survey. There are these are the kind of assumptions that I'll be making when I talk. So don't worry if your survey software at the moment doesn't tick all these boxes. This is a perfect world, and as I said at the start, we don't operate in a perfect world. We operate in the best world that we can be in. So if you are looking to move survey software, do let me know, and we can have a quick 20-minute chat at some point in the next week or so to see if Stribe would be a good fit. But if your survey software ticks most of these boxes, or you're happy with what you got, all good too. So the first kind of thing you want to be thinking about with your survey software is guaranteeing anonymity. You really need to give employees the confidence to share that detailed feedback, and guaranteeing anonymity will help you do that. Typically, we see that with specialized employee survey software. We also see that with survey software that is external to software that you use internally. So for example, perhaps you are a Google company and you rely on Gmail and Google Calendars. If you are also using Google Forms, that can lead to a touch of mistrust from employees because you're all in that ecosystem already. You also want to think about how you can reach everyone with your surveys. If you are a dispersed team, or if you have deskless employees, perhaps you are in manufacturing, perhaps you work in the public sector where a lot of folk are on their feet all day. Creating change that represents everyone is only possible if you can reach everyone with your surveys. If only 40% of your employees answer the surveys, your action plans are not going to represent everyone's feedback and thus will not enact the change in employee engagement that you are looking for. You also want to think about how you can customize the questions. There are a huge amount of kind of survey softwares out there that will give you a question bank. It will cycle through those questions, and that's all you can really do. You might be able to ask an extra couple of questions on top of that, and that's great, but your organization is really, really unique. There will be times where a lot of those questions are just not relevant or right for you at that moment, and you need the ability to craft your own surveys. So always keep that in mind too. You also want to be able to get segmentable reports. You really need to be able to understand where your hotspots are, and specialized survey software will help you achieve this whilst also guaranteeing that employee anonymity that we've talked about. You also want to think about how the survey can support you with those post-survey communications as well. Open and honest communications on survey outcomes and action planning are really key to creating happy, engaged teams moving forwards. So having a think about how that software either completes that action for you or supports you to do that really effectively is super important. So the next few slides are going to delve into a few of the things that you need to be thinking about when building or creating your first or next employee survey. So the first thing is to review previous survey launches. Now, I know what you're thinking. If it's your first survey, you definitely can't do this, but bear with me. Looking back and learning from the past will always create improvements for the future. If you haven't run a survey before, have a look at other internal employee projects you've launched recently. There will always be something you can learn from them that will help you shape the way that you launch your employee surveys. That might be a mental health awareness campaign or maybe a recent sustainability drive. But before you dive into creating a survey launch plan, it's always a really good idea to take a look at what you've done before. Have a think about identifying your wins, your losses, and any opportunities that you can apply to this survey. Things you might discover are, did employees understand the key messages that you launched the survey or that initiative with? Did we actually reach the correct group of employees with the communications that we put out? Were our communications accessible to all? Did employees find it easy to access those communications? Did employees trust those communications? Was there anything about the communication or that initiative that was perhaps creating confusion or surprise for employees? And did we make it clear where employees could send questions if they had any? For example, about maybe the initiative or the survey that you ran itself? Did you use the right internal communications channels? And were the communications that you sent consistent across all the channels? Really, really important one, particularly for surveys, that you have consistency. So those types of things and those questions that you ask will really help you get you in the right mindset for creating that launch plan. Surveying your employees without a clear goal in mind is kind of like scientists conducting expensive research without a clear hypothesis. It's just not something that would happen. So anytime you want to gather employee feedback through surveys, you really need to have a clear understanding of the goal of the survey. Having this clear goal achieves two really important things. One, it helps you build your survey and decide on the best questions to include. You don't need to ask questions about pay and reward if you want to understand how employees feel about your learning and development programs. So it keeps you super focused on what is important. It also creates focus, like I said, and gives employees a clear incentive to answer the survey. When employees understand exactly why you're surveying them and what changes they will see if they participate, they'll be more likely to take the time to complete the survey. So having this goal creates that consistency and creates that focus for not only your communications, but the survey itself. Some examples for goals for surveying employees might be understanding the causes of HR issues, perhaps things like employee turnover or absenteeism, reviewing your employee experience, for example, onboarding, training, or development, understanding employee happiness overall, and maybe researching employee sentiment about parts of their workday, maybe workload, compensation, or management. You also might want to gain knowledge to help you build a new policy. That might be a new benefits policy, maybe work from home, or maybe you're developing your maternity leave. Try to ask yourself why before creating an employee survey, and always consider how you can use the data to improve the work lives of your employees. Also, make sure the reason is really evident in your survey communications and even the name of your survey. Even if it's just an internal name for your HR team, it will help keep you really focused. Make the name of the survey really, really specific as well, not just employee engagement survey -March. I never want to see that again. I want to see things like employee survey on learning and development. It will keep you really, really focused on what matters for that particular survey and keeps you accountable to that focus. Finally, the next one is avoid building your survey on assumptions. When you feel ill, you might go to the doctor to have a problem checked out. A good doctor will ask a load of different questions to understand your general health and understand other factors that might be affecting your life, such as stress, alcohol, or more. Symptoms are usually the effect of a deeper problem, and a doctor's goal is to understand and ask questions to determine the root cause of that issue. In a similar fashion, surveys are a way for you to test organizational health when a workplace issue, such as employee turnover, starts to have a negative impact, and being able to uncover the real underlying issue relies on being able to ask the right questions. I think I need to put my teeth in. My words are all getting tangled today. For example, they assume that maybe management issues cause high turnover, and as a result, you design the surveys to only assess employee satisfaction with management. This approach will result in only getting a biased and partial picture of why your employees are unhappy and leaving. What about all the other areas of employee experience? For example, benefits and compensation, career growth, leadership, work-life balance, and more. If you stick to these assumptions, you may miss out on all of those insights. So I hear you ask, how do I do this if I've got a very specific goal in mind? When using employee surveys to understand the root cause of HR issues, for example, like high turnover or absenteeism, you need to think about how your surveys can include a mix of questions that allow you to test the broader area of employee engagement related to that issue. Don't make assumptions about the root cause just until you have enough data to support it. So make sure that you're exploring your goal, map out all of those related facets, and then ensure that you're taking a really well-rounded approach to the problem and the goal in that survey. Once you have data to support the reason behind your assumptions, you can then pursue that and go deeper in with surveys in that particular goal. But when you're starting to see an issue or something arise and you want to use surveys to understand what's influencing that, you need to keep kind of more of a well-rounded approach. Another point is just to agree on survey objectives. These survey objectives are going to be really, really key for you when communicating your survey in a way that is consistent and brings up employees on board and achieves a high response rate. They're also going to be really, really key to help you inform any follow-up communications you're doing for your survey, including that you said we did. Remember, your goals need to be SMART, so they need to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. I really like to write mine out so that they can create a foundation of the plan that I'm working on. And we do that with all of our customers too at the start when we're working through the survey and people strategy planning sessions, but you can do whatever it works best for you. These objectives don't need to be complicated. I've given you some examples there. They just help provide a bit of a purpose and consistency for those survey communications. We recommend having at least one that's focused on survey performance and one that covers more of an organizational objective. These are also really useful if you have a wider project team working on your surveys. And they will also give you a benchmark for reviewing and planning future surveys, giving you a better structure to review those wins and opportunities for next time. So just going back to that start point there about reviewing things. Another point is just to think about picking the right survey cadence for you. Every organisation is so different and benefits from a different survey schedule. We get asked this all the time. It's probably our top question. How often should I run a survey? Unfortunately, there's no one-size-fits-all rule for surveys. There's just a few things that we can share with you about how to get it right for your team. And it's really important that you do so too. If you choose a cadence that's too frequent, you're going to risk overwhelming your HR team. You're going to create too much work that's difficult to balance with other priorities, and you're going to set up that action planning for failure. And we know how important that action planning is for future buy-in and employee engagement. A good survey cadence will also help your employees create a habit and get into a routine with surveys, which does, again, ultimately improve buy-in. For example, a lot of our customers run things like Feedback Friday on the last Friday of the month or the quarter, and that's like that line in that sand for employees to know that they are expecting a survey. So the most important thing to remember when creating a schedule is consistency. Consistency will help you and your managers create a habit with that survey routine. It also helps improve survey engagement from your team as they begin to see regular changes created as a result of their feedback. So a few things that we like to go through when helping our customers decide on their cadence are things like, what themes are you exploring with your pulse survey? So the theme of your questions and any surveys that you wish to repeat provide a really good guide for how often you should send them. For example, if you're including questions on employee well-being, you might find it helpful to ask these monthly. Do your employees have increased workloads at certain times of the year? It's really, really important to take into account employees' workloads when planning your schedule so that you can ensure your response rates remain high and you're not adding an extra task to their list. So yeah, just one that we actually don't see kind of taken into account an awful lot, but it is an important one. How quickly can you communicate the results once the survey has closed? Again, a super important one because we recommend communicating with employees about your last survey before you launch a new one. This shows employees that you're committed to taking action based on their feedback, and it will also really help you maintain good response rates and build trust. There'll be a little bit more on that later as well. Will you need to make any changes based on the survey feedback? And will they need to be approved by senior management? Again, if you need to make changes based on survey feedback, for example, updating a work from home policy to give employees better guidance, it's best practice to ensure that you at least have an idea of the specific changes and the timelines for this, and communicate that with employees before your next survey. Do you have more employees on annual leave at certain times of the year? We work with a few kind of large education trusts and things like that. So summer is a real no-go for them. So keep in mind that if a large proportion of your team are on annual leave or off, they won't be able to contribute to that survey. So is it worth taking this into account when creating your survey schedule, particularly if you are looking for a survey that will give you data that represents everyone? Very, very important to think about. How long is your survey as well? The more questions that you include in your surveys, the less frequently that you should send them. This just helps balance that time commitment that you're asking of employees and ensures that you maintain a really good response rate too. For surveys of around 5 questions, we recommend a monthly cadence, and then you can build up or down from there depending on your preferences. The other one that's always good to think about when you're thinking about that pulse survey or that survey cadence is how often your business reports on other key metrics. Having a think about how you can align your employee surveys with the reporting of your organization's KPIs means that you can include those results within your management reports. And this is a really effective way to communicate the results to colleagues and also shows them how seriously you want to take those results. The final point before we move on to the next section is just having a think about choosing the right moment to launch that survey and put it live. This will ensure that everyone has that chance to contribute their feedback. So for example, I know I've mentioned this already, but are you entering a busy deadline or holiday period? When are employees most likely to have time to answer the survey is also a really important one to think about. And have you closed the feedback loop on the previous survey? So again, just a few things to think about there. A according to our data, we received the most pulse responses on our software at the following times. So just a top tip for you to write down and have a think about. Mondays between 10 and 11, Thursdays between 10 and 11, and Fridays between 2 and 3. So these times are all times where employees, for customers that are using our system, are most likely to be sending their pulse survey responses, and they might also be reflective of the times that you might get the most responses to. So for our customers, as a guide, we tend to let them know about these times so they can schedule their surveys to go live at those times. That might be slightly different for you. The second piece of the puzzle when it comes to thinking about how to construct how to launch your surveys is how to construct and build questions that will help employees share really detailed quality feedback. Asking the right survey questions is a really pivotal step in the journey towards successful launch. Asking relevant and relatable questions not only empowers you with the data-driven insights you need to create change, but also demonstrates to employees that their voices are really, really heard and valued. This in turn fosters a sense of trust and engagement. Employees feel more invested in future surveys, knowing that their feedback directly impacts decision-making. And additionally, the right survey questions help you track trends and progress over time. And by repeating those survey questions at regular intervals, you'll be able to measure the effectiveness of your engagement strategies, your action planning, and adjust any approaches that you need to accordingly. So super, super important. It's also really important to think about this in terms of employees' needs as well. Employees' needs and preferences evolve quite quickly, and staying in touch with those needs is really crucial to maintaining a positive work environment and improving employee engagement. So again, just thinking about repeating some of those questions that you are really, really sure on. So we're going to be going through a few of the rules in a second to help you kind of understand how to create the right survey questions. But just a note on this one as well, to follow Stribe's channels, and I'll make sure to connect with attendees of the workshop afterwards, because we are actually about to launch a new feature at Stribe that will really, really help you with this. If you have questions that you want to create that are custom, they're unique to your organization, you haven't seen them anywhere else, we have a feature launching this week that will help you check those questions and make sure that they stick to a lot of these rules, and it takes some of that guesswork out of your day as well. So super, super exciting for us here. So the first rule is only ask questions that you can act on. You may have picked this up as I've been talking already, but we're really, really focused on change here at Stribe and using employee feedback to enact that change. So we always want to make sure that the questions that you're asking are questions that you have control of and that you can act on. This will improve your response rate because employees can see how that question you're asking will enact change. It will also support super effective action planning from your perspective because you have data that you can really act on and build a strategy with. And finally, it's going to support future surveys because it will give you data that really points you in the right direction for future surveys. So where I was talking earlier about diagnosing a problem and having a think about all of the facets that are associated with that problem, if you are asking the right questions and the questions that you can act on, you will then be able to drill down and really understand that issue in more depth. For example, what does this look like? So if you are perhaps in the public sector or you have quite a strict pay structure, you may not be able to control a whole lot around pay and rewards. It might not be something that can be influenced by employee feedback. So consider reframing the question to explore other topics that you can control or influence. For example, using a question that is focused on their well-being will help you understand what's important to them, and you can drive benefits and improvements in that area instead to support employees. You've also got to think about the survey question structure itself. This is really, really crucial to the success of your surveys. Not only will the structure influence your results, but it will also impact your response rate. If employees don't understand the question, they just won't answer it. So I'm going to cover some of the do's and don'ts of question structures now. So one point to consider on all of this is the tone of your question. Always aim to keep your questions neutral for the most accurate answer. Leading questions are always going to subtly point employees to answer a certain way. So in our example here, how much did you enjoy the training session this week? You would maybe want to change to how did you find the training session this week? Another is how you want your surveys to another is how you want your employees to answer the question. Now, there's no right or wrong with this one. Just be aware that you'll capture different answers depending on how you structure your question. So, for example, how was your day today? You will capture feedback that is very in the moment. You will capture their emotions and the detail of their day. How was your week last week? Will be a much more reflective answer. It will take into account everything that happened in that week, and it will be slightly less emotional, and it will be kind of more reflective of the week. So it's something to keep in mind. There's no right or wrong here. It's just one that we always like to talk about and look at. Another is having a think about question relevancy. So to make employees feel like you're really invested in their feedback, you need to make sure that questions are relevant for everyone. If you don't do this, it will affect your response rate and your buy-in for future surveys as well. If you do want to understand employees' feedback on specific topics, what we recommend is finding software that will help you target those questions to the right demographics whilst maintaining anonymity. If you can't target the particular segments of employees, that's okay. Just try and broaden out your question so that it applies to everyone. In this example here, perhaps employees have just moved offices, or perhaps you've just updated the layout. How have you found the layout changes within the Manchester office? If you send that to everyone and you have multiple offices, folk are going to be turned off that survey. So a better way of asking that is, does your working environment support your well-being? That will help you understand how everyone's working environment supports their well-being. Now, if you've got survey software that helps you explore those demographics after the fact, when you've got the data, that's brilliant. You'll still be able to pick out, hopefully, some feedback on those layout changes for the Manchester-based folk. But ideally, what you would be able to do is target that question specifically to folk located in Manchester, separate from the rest of your employee population. Another thing to think about is having a look at the answer structure itself, the question answer structure, because that has a huge influence on how useful the data is when you look at the report. So whilst things like yes/no questions can be useful in certain circumstances, particularly where you maybe need a decisive outcome, such as voting on a decision, more often than not, a scale will allow you to see the true nature of the detail of employees' feedback. So we do recommend always using a scale and adding an open-ended free text question to gather more detail. So what this might look like is, did you have a good week this week? Perhaps that would be a yes/no question, and you would have no follow-up. Just adding that scale on a scale of 1 to 10, how was your week this week, gives employees much more freedom to answer specific to their week, and prompting them for that free text follow-up question will help you gather detail to understand what exactly happened to influence their score and perhaps how you can support them better in the future. Another example of this is looking at, would you recommend XYZ organization as a great place to work? Again, that could be a yes/no. What we want to do is just move that to a scale so we can really understand not only where employees sit now, but how we're moving them and positively influencing them and their scores for the future. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend XYZ place to work as a great place to work? So just a couple of examples there of how we can shift them to really get that super measurable result. So finally, the third and final piece of the puzzle is the steps to ensure a perfect launch for your next survey. Here we're going to be focusing more on the kind of communications and pre-planning for your surveys itself. So one thing we always love to think about when we're thinking about launching surveys is our emails, our messages, the graphics, and really making sure that employees are excited and bought into our surveys. And it can be really, really easy to create these amazing survey communications campaigns and then get really disappointed when your response rate perhaps doesn't reflect the effort that you've put in. So one thing we always like to speak about and work quite closely with our customers on is considering the different audience groups that you have in your organization so that you can ensure that your survey reaches absolutely everyone. So a few of the different things that we like to go through when we're in this pre-planning stage are things like, what does their day or week look like? How do they currently feel about working at your organization? What are the key messages that they will engage with? To reach certain groups, what are the best channels? What is the most likely channel they will use to engage with your survey? And what's going to be in it for them? And why is this piece so important? You will ensure that your survey response rate is high and inclusive of everyone if you include this step when you're planning your next survey. Including everyone means that the data you gather and act on will be reflective of everyone, and it will make sure that you are more likely to create a positive impact and reflect the needs of all employees with that change that you're creating. We also want to make sure that we're gathering the views of folk that aren't typically confident to speak up using other channels, and the surveys are here to help you draw out that feedback from those that typically stay quiet. So making sure you reach everyone is really, really important. One way I like to use these questions and this point is by just creating some employee segments. I like to have these written down. I am someone that documents everything, but others are happy to keep it more informal, perhaps just something that you work to in your own mind. These are just a couple of examples that you might want to have a think about. Like I say, it's just a couple of sentences on a page. Having these front of mind will make sure that any kind of communications campaigns, whether that's for surveys or future HR initiatives, will be as inclusive as possible to every kind of hard to reach employee group that you have. The next step is you want to gain buy-in from your team managers. This step is one of the most misunderestimated but most important steps in the process. Managers take such an active role in encouraging the culture and community and engagement of your team. And this means they have a huge influence on their team and will play a really key role in the launch of your survey. New initiatives can make people feel really uneasy or reluctant about supporting them, especially if it requires things like training or changes to their work pattern. Managers already have a huge amount on their plates, and finding time to start something new, such as surveys, can be really, really difficult for them. So some of the points that you might want to hit when you're communicating to managers are that the pulse surveys or surveys can help save them time, helps them understand the little things so that they don't become the big things, particularly in their own teams. And again, this comes back to that segmentable survey software that you have. If it has the ability to create reports for each individual manager, this point becomes really, really important. It will empower them with data-led decisions, and it will help them prioritize everything on their plate too. We actually have a few really great blogs on this topic on stribehq.com if you do want to learn more on how to bring managers on your survey journey. Another kind of point is to create that set of key messages. Once you have those employee segments, creating a structure for employees' communications will ensure that your communications effectively engage them. So having consistent messages means that all of the employees will hear the same thing. And that is key because it will avoid the introduction of doubt, often around anonymity, and Chinese whispers too. It's also really useful to document this for anyone that has more than 1 or 2 people working on the survey launch, because it means everyone is on the same page and we're singing off the same hymn sheet. There are some examples on this slide of the kind of key message themes that you will want to hit. Some of them are why you're launching an employee survey, what topics are you looking to enhance? For example, that might be employee engagement, benefits or rewards, or mental health. What you're trying to achieve with the survey and how that will feed into organizational policy and development. How the survey feedback will be collected and what employees can expect from participating. How they can access the survey. Never underestimate this one. It is a really, really important one, especially if you have dispersed or deskless workers that don't have frequent contact with yourselves or the managers. how the survey software works itself and how it maintains anonymity, who to contact for technical support or training queries, and when they can expect to hear the results of the survey. So I just like to have these bullet pointed out and handy, and I just check any communications off against them to make sure it's hyper clear for everyone. Another top tip is just to identify your survey communications channels. Again, personally, I like to create a table that kind of outlines the channel, the purpose, and the owner of each of those things to make it clear if you're working across a larger team or maybe with your communications team, kind of whose jurisdiction is what. It's also really great just to have these kind of listed out, because there will be some that you don't use regularly but are perhaps really impactful. Some of the channels that we work regularly with our customers to devise communications for their surveys are things like email, internal messaging systems such as Teams and Slacks, intranets. We support with virtual training presentations as well. Any physical marketing materials that are maybe useful, particularly if you're multi-site. Videos, social media posts are great because it gives you that external boost as well. Team meetings and events, staff newsletters, and external websites and blogs are all really useful to use. Next, have an idea of your timeline and agree this with any stakeholders. So having an owner for your survey will guarantee that the survey moves from an idea to completion. The owner needs to have an interest in employee surveys, knowledgeable with internal communications, and be able to manage those key stakeholders that we've already spoken about. They also need to have the power to make changes based on the survey feedback too. Having a timeline is also really important because it makes sure that everything moves to completion, and that includes that action planning and you said we did piece. It's amazing the difference that simply communicating a survey close date has on your overall response rate. So always make sure you have one penciled in. Anyone that doesn't have a deadline will be losing a nice percentage of employee responses. So make sure you have that in because it really focuses the mind. These timelines can be really, really simple. This example here is showing a 4-week cycle from survey launch to completion. And this can easily be updated for longer or shorter periods too. So survey comms is always really important to remember to include communications whilst the survey is live too. So you can see we've got some launch communications running up to the survey live. And then you can see we also have additional communications running through that survey live period. Those might be reminders to managers, prompts to employees, updates to teams about response rates. It's quite nice to add that competitive element in there and continually kind of remind teams about who's kind of doing the best survey response rates. Excuse me. And also make sure you include reminders about when the survey closes. Make sure you also plan enough time for analysis ahead of any you said we did activities you did. But make sure that it's all timely enough that employees feel that their feedback has been listened to and is important to you as well. And it hasn't been just forgotten about. Finally, launching and closing a survey is just the start. The final step in all of this is considering how you can gain buy-in for future ones. And that is through making sure that you communicate the results and any actions that you have off of the back of those surveys every single time. If you aren't sure that you have the resource to communicate or act after a survey closes, then have a think about your pulse survey schedule or survey schedule and just make sure that you can include this step. So you might just want to elongate that cadence and that schedule out if you can't act on the surveys in between. So some ideas of things to include in your You Said We Did. We call them You Said We Did. I know there's some debate online about whether that is an overdone saying at the moment. If anyone has any ideas for a better name, feel free to let us know. But yeah, we are still calling them You Said We Did. So some notes to include on those are just to thank employees for contributing. They've spent their time on this, so a thank you is always appreciated. Make sure you share the final response rate as well. Employees are always really interested in hearing about final response rates. Include those surveys insights, but keep them broad. We don't recommend putting any kind of demographic specific insights in, but share those with managers in a closed environment so that they can work through those themselves. Share all of the results, not just the positive ones. Employees really appreciate transparency and will feel super listened to if you share all of the feedback. Remember to share the next steps as well. This doesn't need to just be action. We've talked a lot about action plans. It can be that there needs to be more research done first, and that's okay. As long as you have some kind of idea of the direction you're going and the action you're going to take, it doesn't always need to be change. But just be upfront with employees about this and make sure that they feel confident in the plan that you have. And also remember to ask employees to share any further thoughts, ideas, and feedback they have. They will have some great ideas once they see the outcomes of those surveys. More often than not, if you come to them and say, this was the score, this is what we're thinking about doing based on it, what do you think about that? They will have more ideas. So always make sure that you're encouraging that feedback cycle. And finally, I just want to re-emphasize the importance of choosing the right software platform to send your surveys with. Again, things like, can everyone access a survey? This is really, really important, particularly if you have a large proportion of colleagues who aren't desk-based. Make sure you find a solution that doesn't just rely on email distribution. For example, can you share links, QR codes, and can employees access your surveys maybe via an app that the survey software has? Do employees truly trust it's anonymous? Using free tools such as Google or Microsoft Forms can introduce some doubt, so a third-party survey provider can give confidence that everything is truly anonymous. And can you customize the questions, or does the platform ask that you ask a set recommended by them? This can create constraints that affect your response rate, particularly if you're looking at actionable data, if you're looking at tailored questions, and if you're making sure every kind of set that you ask you can control and action, and if they're relevant for colleagues as well. So these are all just things to keep in mind when you are choosing the right survey software for you. At Stribe, I will just plug us. We have apps, QR codes, and survey links to make sure that everyone can access the surveys at any point in time. We are truly anonymous, and we have a huge anonymity page on our website just to go through exactly how that works. And everything on our tool is fully customizable too. So we have super flexible surveys that are unlimited. You have question packs that have been vetted by our people scientists. We have our question tune, which is the new feature coming this week that helps you create custom questions that checks them off against our survey rules. And we also have the ability to ask kind of any question you want with any answer type you want. So really, really flexible, but supported by that people science team. Does anyone have any questions? I haven't seen any come through today, which gives me confidence that it has been a thorough and detailed webinar, sorry. If anyone does have any questions, feel free to pop them in just now, but I will just start kind of closing off the webinar if there are none. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hello, Emily. So yes, we have a question. So is there a minimum response rate for a valid participant response? It is different for everyone. We like to see our customers achieving 65 to kind of 80%. That's quite a broad percentage, but that hits that kind of majority. Typically for our customer groups and our survey software, we're seeing average survey response rates of around 85, 86% at the moment. And that's just because that is a combination of all of the tips and tricks that I've shared with you in our webinar, plus our survey software itself really lends itself to getting that high response rate. So if you are looking to boost your response rate, see if you can use some of those tips or have a chat with us about introducing the software itself. But yeah, we would say aim for at least 65%. Anywhere up to 65 to 75% is a really good place to be, and above that is obviously excellent. Anything below that we can work with you on if you want to get in touch. I hope that answers your question, but feel free to ask a follow-up if it hasn't. If anyone else has a question, feel free to pop it in the box now. My email is lucy@stribehq.com. So if you do want to pop me a question afterwards or start up a bit of conversation about this, maybe there's a couple of points on here that you want to follow up with, I'm really happy to have a call with anyone that is looking to get some more knowledge on the topic, because it is a really important one to get right. So I will just say thank you so much for joining me. After this, if you have picked up any insights or tips or tricks that you would be happy to share, I always love to see what you've learned. So feel free to tag myself or Stribe on LinkedIn. We absolutely love hearing what you've learned from these talks. We will be sharing a recording of the talk. Feel free to share this with colleagues or contacts that you think will find this useful. And like I said, if you need anything else from me or the team, or if you have a quick question or need some advice on surveys, please do get in touch. Lucy@stribehq.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn under Lucy Harvey. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to finish the webinar